Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kelorn, Venacera, and Arun.
Hello and welcome to episode 131 of the Warships Podcast. Please accept my apologies for getting sick last week, but we're back with another episode just for you guys. I'm your host, Kelorn, and Venacera is back this week to join Arun and I. How are you doing, Vanessa? You were sick the week before, correct?
I know, it's crazy. It's like it's going around or something.
Yeah, I totally lost my voice. So, recording a podcast, that doesn't really work so well last week. And we unfortunately just couldn't make it work on the weekend. So here we are this week.
Always good to be back.
And you're not getting sick now, are you, Arun?
Well, my secret is that I'm always sick, especially right now since it's allergy season. And I am allergic to grass or grass pollen.
So you're allergic to the air that you breathe.
Right now, pretty much.
Well, for all those of you that suffer from allergies, please accept our apologies. We know how that goes. All right, well, Vanessa, last episode we went through some of the thoughts on the new test ships, and we've all had a chance to spend a little bit more time with them. We do want to hear your thoughts, initial thoughts, as well as how you felt during the testing, and then Arun and I will kind of add our thoughts as needed, as we have had a little more experience with them. But before we do that, a dev blog came out with some upcoming changes for these test ships that we really should keep in mind as we may have this discussion. First up, Kleber, the French DD, is getting a nerf to detectability base from 7.98 to 8.88 kilometers and a slight detectability nerf while firing in smoke, something that she really barely ever does, unless you're playing with somebody else who's smoking up, in which case, more power to you. Arun, you said you were going to crunch the numbers on what that meant for Kleber and her maximum detectability.
It's slightly below 7, ever so slightly.
So she goes from what, like 6.6 to
6.3 to 7.
Through 6.3 to 7. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that's still not too
worse.
bad. But, it's one of those things where I had a hard enough time using the torpedoes as it was with the 8-kilometer torpedoes and having the 1.7 kilometers of detection. What does that do to her as her potential torpedo attacks?
Well, I would say that you mostly want to use it when... I don't think it really makes much of a difference, because you're not going to go in and try to be a torpedo boat. Although I think you could have done that before. I don't think it would be a good idea now. But most of your time is going to be spent on firing with your guns anyway, so I don't think it's going to matter too much. So I think it's kind of okay. But I suppose it is a nerf on her torpedo usage. But mostly you want to use those torpedoes when ships are coming towards you anyway, so you have some more room to play anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of my same thoughts. I mean, beforehand, before the change, I would be spamming those torpedoes because they were pretty quick reload, and the firing angles on them is outstanding. You could really, coupled with your speed, and just kind of slightly turn, drop off a spread, maybe drop, turn to the other side, drop off another spread, and you just sail in. And granted, I mean, with the changes to detectability, you're not really gonna maybe want to be charging into a cap, like kind of like what I was doing. But if people are chasing you, you can always kind of drop them at people who are chasing you, or if you are just kind of monitoring a cap, you just kind of pre-torp the cap and then just kind of linger around and see if something pops up, and then you could start shooting at it and maybe your torpedoes will hit. But yeah, it definitely will change the gameplay a bit on it.
Well, I definitely have a bunch of things I want to talk about in Kleber because I played a ton of it this last couple of weeks. But we'll do that when we get to that on the list. So Indomitables rocket damage is being reduced from 2350 to 2100, which I believe is the Tier 8 British carrier. Yoshino's rudder shift is being reduced from 15 to 13.9 seconds, which matches Azuma. And the option of 12-kilometer torps is going to be added. I think this is going to be interesting, but we'll talk. Yoshino is definitely on our list of things that I know that Vanessa and I want to talk about. Bayard's fore and aft armor plating is increasing from 13 to 16 millimeters, but her firing range is being reduced from 17.4 to 16.4 kilometers. Yudachi is getting a torpedo reload buff and a torpedo detection buff for her 15-kilometer torpedoes. Kreml is having her Sigma increased from 1.7 to 1.8, and her reload reduced from 34 to 33 seconds. And Benham is essentially getting Fletcher torpedoes. So with all of that in mind, we'll start out with the meme machine itself, Slava, which is called Pobeda in the client right now. And we'll go down the list in the same order that we did on last episode, so you guys can kind of keep it in mind. So Vanessa, did you play around with the Slava Pobeda at all? There's been a lot of what's the word for it? There's a lot of outcry about it.
Clorn, you should just say, did I win? That's all you need to say, because they could be the most broken ship that I've ever played. Barring, I don't know, Chisari was pretty close. The difference with Chisari was you might have been playing with a lot of newer players. This is a whole nother level of redonkulousness. Like, it is stupid. The fact that you could pretty much find something 29, almost 30 kilometers away and go, oh, I'm just going to fire at that for, whatever, and delete it is, pretty broken. It literally is, I win.
I don't know. I wouldn't quite put it that way. I don't think you necessarily automatically win. I think right now there are certain ships that have slightly more sway on the game than Slava does, so I don't quite fully agree. But I do think she's a bit too strong.
What's really interesting is that I've talked to some of the Russian CCs, and on the Russian server, Pobeda Slava, whatever you want to call it, is basically, they think it's a joke and it's awful. They don't like it at all. They think it's underpowered. And I don't know if this is just one of those things where the server identity of how they play is just so different that it's changing what is good about it. But it really is striking to me that they think that Kreml is overpowered, but Slava is underpowered.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And it's funny. I was watching an older video on Panzercracker with a Yamato. It came up in my YouTube feed and was like, oh, this is an older one, but I'll watch it. And Yamato goes in and does 10 kills. I was like, wow. So I watched it, and it was on the CIS server. And it just kind of struck me how people fought on that server. And no, you're not going to fight like that on the NA server. And I trust EU servers is, kind of comparable to the NA. And that just really is mind-boggling, because you literally start the match, especially with the proliferation of carriers out there and spotting. People are spotted straight away, and Pobeda Slava, you just oh, okay, there you are, shoot. And within 9 to 15 seconds, your shells are already there. Their shells are going so fast. They just reach their, it's ridiculous. They're rail guns on steroids. They make Moskva look like, whatever. It's crazy. And I cannot, for the life of me, don't understand why no one on the CIS can't see it that way.
Probably because when they engage, it happens so quickly that you might get your early long-range shots in, but then everything ends up being at close range, and Slava obviously isn't king at that range anymore, so people go she doesn't seem that great on average. At least that's my guess, why the meta feels so different. I mean, we've all heard how the CIS server has much more brawling and whatnot, so I think that would explain it.
I don't know. I've played around with Slava, and I definitely feel that she needs a nerf. She certainly is far too powerful in her current state. But honestly, one of the things that my biggest problems with her is that her armor's too good for what she is. I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and I honestly feel like you could safely reduce her bow plating to under 32 millimeters and allow 16-inch guns to be able to overmatch your armor. if you would got that down to like 27 millimeters and all of a sudden, you're being overmatched by 16 millimeter guns, the I'm going to be angled to you, so I'm safe from when you're shooting at me from far away. Suddenly, that's no longer true, and I feel like that might, if you wanted to keep her guns the way they are, that might be enough of a way to nerf her overall damage output throughout the game that she's not going to be able to just sit in the back and be immune.
I disagree, because how often do you get front citadels at long range anyway? I think it's rather rare. Even if you're fighting Yamato versus Yamato, you're gonna be like 10 kilometers usually when
Right,
you start
but
getting
it's
those
not the
front.
frontal citadels, Arun. It's the bounces that you're avoiding.
Well, yeah, but you're not gonna be able to get the citadel hits from range anyway. You might get penetration, sure, but the citadel's gonna just run out of hit points, or the bow is gonna run out of hit points at some point. I don't. I I think if anything, it will just make the players who play that ship just stay further away, which I don't think is good for the game.
Yeah, I mean, there was so many times that like I would just sail pretty much broadside at full speed because it's like even if someone was going to try to engage me, I'm so far away that I don't think they'd be comfortable taking that shot. And even when I did get hit, like they weren't massive hits, and I'm like, okay, well, every 30 or so seconds, I'm just firing at something. And it literally is. I sail on the back of the map every 30 seconds firing at something and damn near laughing as, I'm going to town on damage.
Actually laughing, you mean? Like literally cackling like a witch over a pot, right?
Yeah, pretty maniacally.
I guess my biggest problem with the ship isn't that she's overpowered. It's that I think she promotes a gameplay style that Wargaming has slowly been trying to phase out. And then you bring in something like this, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's your sniper battleship. And
And that's exactly right.
yeah. So I don't know. Well, we'll have to see how it ends up.
Well, maybe Wargaming is trying to, how they're probably gonna nerf CVs or are nerfing CVs. Maybe Wargaming is trying to give those guys an alternative.
Very possible. Very possible. Alrighty, well, let's move on to Yoshino, which, I guess the big news here is that everybody that I've talked to really likes this ship. I think it's a lot of fun to play. The 20 kilometer torps are pretty hilarious. But, we talked a little bit about the idea of 12 kilometer torps on her, but now they're actually thinking about adding those. And now that I've had a chance to think about it, I don't think that I would choose the 12 kilometer torps.
Well, I mean, the 20s are it's hilarious and fun to have. But the 12s do offer an option. I mean, you can what's the max concealment again on Yoshino?
13.3, Arun. Am I right? Something like that.
Thought it was like 13.1 or something around that.
Yeah, it's 13 something, but it's certainly not. You lose the ability to stealth.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
What is it?
It's 11.9.
It's 11.9. Okay, yeah. Sorry, you're
Maybe
right.
I'm not taking the. Maybe I didn't take one of the stealth modules. Well, either way, so you're pretty close to stealth torping, or still can technically, but
they have to be coming at you.
They have to be coming at you. Or you really have to be good at turning, dropping, and maintaining enough speed to never be detected. Either way, like I like Zoe's 12 kilometer torps, and I feel like these would be, just as good. They're fast. They got a little bit better concealment. They're just you trade. You have options, whatever you're comfortable with. And, the 20s are great and fun, but, I would feel just as good with the 12s, but thankfully they're giving us the options. And that's ultimately what I think you should have is an option, whether you want the 12s or 20s, let the player choose what they're comfortable with.
I mean, I do think that it is the identity of Yoshino to have those torps. Like either you choose the 12s, and that are quite a bit faster, honestly, or or the 20s, if you want to kind of do the stealth torping thing. I think either way, it is what those torpedoes are what make Yoshino so much fun to play.
Which is why I asked for them on Azuma for so long.
They aren't that much faster, though, are they? They're like 67 versus 62.
Yeah, I think it's 67 versus 62.
I guess that is some change. The main change is in the torpedo concealment, though. The 12 kilometers have better concealment than F3s, by the way.
Yeah, no, the 12-kilometer torpedo concealment is a big deal. But honestly, I feel, we talked about those 20-kilometer torps on Shimakaze. They're the same torps that's on Shima. And, those 20-kilometer Shima torps, they're surprising because everybody thinks they're going to run out, and they never do. They think that they have the psychological, I don't have to dodge them kind of thing.
I don't know. In the current meta, you could probably double their range. Maybe then they won't run out.
That's a little harsh, but...
I know in testing I was engaging a Montana that was running away, and it was about, I don't know, I want to say 18, 19 kilometers when it got hit. And it was like, yeah, they're 20 kilometers, and the silliness of it is like, you've literally seen those torpedoes forever, but oh well.
Well, that brings us to Benham. And honestly, Vanessa, I had a really hard time with this ship. And I'm really glad that they're adding the Fletcher torpedoes, because I really feel like it needs them.
I put that on the feedback. Though I did have a lot of success in the ship, and it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the extra damage that the larger torpedoes were doing, and I caught several destroyers out, one hit KOing several ships that I'm pretty sure if I was using the normal USN torps would have left just but a sliver of life left. And I thought that was kind of neat and comical in a bit. But my feedback did focus on, hey, look, in this day and age, with the prevalence of radar, and now with carriers constantly spotting you, at least in the current meta, it's really difficult to make 9.2 kilometer torpedoes work, especially on a tier 9 ship. And
it's the radar problem too. Getting to 9.2 kilometers to fire your torpedoes in an environment where there's a lot of 12-kilometer radars floating around. It's really difficult.
And ships that were improved to 10-kilometer radar with improved radar time, at least for that individual ship, yeah, it definitely does make a difference. I mean, I wish, I know some people strongly disagree, but I've been saying this about USS Kidd. I think it should at least get 10-kilometer torpedoes. But it's the same argument, and I'm glad that they listened, and I'm really excited to try this now with slightly longer torpedoes, because I feel it will make that slight difference when you've got those campy cruisers, chilling there in that position where, I can kind of sneak over here and drop some torpedoes at them. But, at 9.2, you're most likely going to get spotted by that radar or something, and then the gig is up. They know that torpedoes are on the way, and they're just going to move, and you just wasted your cooldown on that.
But actually, the torpedo, you have more reaction time to the new torpedoes by a whole 10%, no, less than 10%, 5%, so actually it isn't really a nerf. Considering the torpedo speed goes from 55 to 65 knots, I would say the random maneuvering is going to be much less useful against these torpedoes now, and I don't know. I don't think it's a good change overall. I think the ship is going to be, if not too strong, too annoying to play against at least. But I do think it's going to be too strong. I mean, it's basically a Benson. Sure, she's a tier 9, but she also has many torpedoes, and they're pretty good now, almost Fletcher torpedoes.
The problem, Arun, that I had with this ship wasn't necessarily, I did have problems with the torpedoes, but the problem devolved because the torpedoes were bad. You're like, okay, well, do I use my guns? And the guns are terrible. Having only 4 guns, it feels awful.
I didn't think it was too bad. I mean, I'm really used to the Sims So it just felt like a Sims with a lot of torpedoes. And I kind of played it the same way. It just, I had a lot of success. I had a lot of success against other destroyers. I took AA and kept a pretty healthy, go of it with all the carriers. So I guess I had a different experience overall, but I I do agree with you, Arun, on I think 65 knots might be a bit too much and out of the ordinary for USN torps. I think if they do scale back, that's, definitely scale back there and keep it in line with the rest of the torps.
Well, let's kind of take a wait and see how Benham is with these torps. But this is one of the only test ships that we had that I could not bring myself to play at least 5 games in it because it felt so awful. But that brings me to one of the ones that I was the most surprised to have so much fun in, and that's Kleber. Kleber is getting this detection nerf, which frankly it needs something, because honestly I found that Kleber is the perfect ambush hunter. You kind of putz around in a cap, moving at pretty high speed, and then as soon as you detect another destroyer, you pop your reload booster, annihilate it, pop your speed boost, and leave. And then once you're undetected, you kind of troll back. And so I found it to be like a trolly ambush hunter type of destroyer, and I really had a good time with it. I did find that it doesn't do the Khabarovsk, just drive really fast in a straight line and shell you from long range thing particularly well against bigger ships.
Wait,
Mogador
why
is
not?
better.
Sure.
I don't know why had so much trouble with it, but I felt like I wasn't able to juke and dodge and dance the way that the Khabarovsk does, Arun, in the Kleber. Felt like I was taking a lot of damage whenever I was open water firing at like a battleship or something.
That feels kind of weird because you have the range. Or more range, actually.
It's probably the person driving it, Arun.
Well,
I'm just saying that I struggled with it.
The shells
maybe,
are also really slow too compared to Khabarovsk.
Or maybe the opponents just aren't as terrible anymore as you remember with the Khabarovsk. When was the last time you did that with a Khabarovsk? Quite a while ago, I imagine.
I don't own a Khabarovsk.
Oh, well, yeah. I've found
my
that...
my experience with Khabarovsk is them shooting at me, not the other way around.
Oh. I see. Well, I at least objectively, the ship should be much more difficult to hit when they weave and dodge and all these things, because she's faster, she's more maneuverable, and she has slightly more range, so she can do things. And she can upgrade that range even further into absurd levels where, like, if she goes full range, I'm not sure it's even possible to hit her.
Yeah, but you're not going to hit something at that range, though. If you're trying to fire at max range, which it's damn right silly, but yeah.
That was my point, is that when I got to a point where I was actually reliably hitting ships with my shells, they were able to hit me. I guess that's the conclusion I came to. So instead of doing that, I would just troll around until I found something, until I found a destroyer and a cap or anything like that. Because literally, there is not a single destroyer in this game that can survive all the way through a main gun reload booster on this thing, because it's so much damage. It's just ridiculous how much damage you put out when you pop that thing. Like every single destroyer just evaporates. You can't win.
Yeah, that's kind of was my exact same play style, and I'll talk more when we get to Mogador as well, but there's some things that I'll say about
we don't have Mogador, a special section for Mogador. So if you want to talk about Mogador, do it now.
Well, so Kleber, I had the exact same results. In how I try and play destroyers is often anti-DD. And this destroyer did that very, very, very well. Incredibly well. And even with no smoke, the speed was just ridiculous. Like straight up ridiculous. And I was going to get kind of on a tangent about speed, but I'll wait until I finish Mogador. And we talked about the torpedo range on Kleber. Even with the nerf coming in the changes, the angles are still so good you use them as like a standoff, like just put them out there. Like it doesn't matter. They reload so quickly. And when you come across something, reload booster and shell the ever loving you know what out of it and watch it sink. And yeah, everyone's going to be shooting at you, but you're going so fast that it's ridiculous. And the same for Mogador, which Mogador is better. At tier 9, it's a better ship. And they're not nerfing Mogador, but they are Kleber. And I've had some of the best games. Mind you, I don't really care for the play style of these French destroyers, but I had outstanding success in them and played them very, very well. And that's kind of shocking and scary. And just the speed alone, something that just kind of, I don't play the Russian light cruiser. I mean, destroyers. I mean, you know what I mean. I don't care for their play style, and I don't like what they did with, their speed on crack, on steroids, on vodka. And the French destroyers are the same. And I think the game is getting to a silliness point where a destroyer going 55 plus knots, and what? Like, I don't think any of this, I know it's arcade, I know it's not a simulator, but you should have some semblance of realism here. And I feel like this speed is downright breaking the game on these ships. And I know with Bayard, it kind of felt the same. A French cruiser going 40. I don't play a lot of the French cruisers. And when we get to Georgia, going 40 is what, like, the speed in this speed booster and getting these ships up to, non-realistic, non-real life top speeds is mind-boggling. Again, I know this is an arcade game, but it's like it's an arms race where we made ships too accurate, so we need to do something else to give ships, a way to survive. So let's put speeds up to unnatural, unrealistic levels. And I feel like now we've crossed the line. We're leaving realism behind, and we're going to constantly have this arms race where, oh, we're too accurate, so let's make ships, maneuver like crazy, like have agility that is just stupid insane, and speed go to another insane level. And I just wish Wargaming would look at this, maybe curtail it back to a more semblance of realism. It can still be arcadey. I'm not saying this needs to be a simulator and we're going to go play Harpoon, but like this, I don't know. It just, this is something that I've been thinking about for a couple weeks, and I've just wanted to have a diatribe on it because I feel it's getting a bit ridiculous. Kleber and Mogador, to me, really just kind of encapsulated what is kind of this arms race of, we got to do something different, and we've got to go to a bit of an absurd level as power creep just keeps creeping.
I think it was kind of inevitable with the way the game was set up, because I think 55 knots, well, actually, I would say Khabarovsk levels is already the place where aim assist kind of screws you over on trying to shoot at the Khabarovsk that's maneuvering. And on these ships, it's going to be even worse. I don't think we're ever going to get faster ships, though. And I think it was kind of inevitable that we would get these, simply due to it being an interesting type of gameplay. Doesn't matter whether it's arcadey or unrealistic or not. I mean, hell, these numbers don't really matter anyway, because we are dealing with a multiplier anyway on speed. So they could literally just lower the number and bump up the multiplier. The ship would play the exact same way, that would just show lower numbers. So I don't think it matters that much. At least I don't care about it. And what I mean by this is that if you look at the end of the match, you can see that your ship traveled like 130 kilometers or something insane like that. In a 20-minute game, yeah, no, the ship would have to go, 400 kilometers an hour? I don't think so. And they can just lower the Or they can just change the multiplier if they really wanted and just change the numbers. But obviously that would kind of break the numbers on other ships. But maybe that would be more realistic. I don't know. At least from a theme point of view anyway.
I guess one of the things the last thing I wanted to say about Kleber before we kind of move on is that I felt like both of these destroyers in this French line are high skill floor ships. People that are not used to this kind of ship and they jump into it and they're like, oh, I like destroyers, and they get into these ships. These ships aren't like other destroyers, and I feel like there's going to be it's going to be a big divide, right, between you've got some people that play Kleber and it's not very scary because they're not very good at it, and then you have these like super unicum crazy people that Kleber does everything, because I felt like I could make it do whatever the heck I wanted once I kind of understood how the ship worked.
I completely agree with you. I think that's going to be something we'll see going forward, and I think that's one of the reasons why when I said the Kleber was overpowered, people said, well, yeah, but that's because you know how to play it. The average player isn't going to. But I still think the ship is going to be too strong. And actually, Mogador kind of reminds me, or the Mogador and Kleber situation kind of reminds me of back when we tested Minotaur and Neptune. They were initially with HE, they were very, very, very similar. Like Neptune and Minotaur were almost the same type of ship. Their only difference really was concealment, and Minotaur was better in that case. Eventually, it was changed, so I imagine that Mogador isn't going to stay as strong as Kleber either, because right now, Mogador has less range by 600 meters. She has 100 meters worse concealment, but if Kleber gets nerfed, she actually has 600 meters better concealment. Their torpedoes are the same. I think their firepower is the same. Their maneuverability is the same. And Kleber is 0.5 knots faster. I don't think that's a big enough difference between the tier 9 and the tier 10.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that I've talked to think Mogador is just better than Kleber, and it has to do with what it faces. But still, I mean, Kleber is still a very, very good ship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're both really good ships, but yeah, Mogador at this current testing is better.
I don't know. Kleber, is she really that strong? Maybe we need some buffs. I mean, look, there's so much Russian bias in the game. We need to buff Kleber even more, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. But it is funny to come across a Harugumo Arun and just wreck it. Like, be like, haha, I out DPM you. Like, and you're like, and the Harugumo is like, what?
Yeah, and there actually isn't all that much the Harugumo can do in that case.
Alrighty, well, that brings us on to another overpowered French ship called Bayard, which, when I first started the last episode, I called her basically a better Cleveland. I still think she's a better version of Cleveland with reload booster and speed boost. Even with this minor range nerf that they're giving her, they're upgrading her bow armor a little bit, and Bayard's still just a ridiculously good ship, in my opinion, Arun.
I actually think it's a buff instead of a nerf, because, sure, yes, your range goes from, 17.4 to 16.4?
But your detectability when you're firing, it goes down to 16.4.
Yes, and you get your bow goes from 13 to 16 millimeters. And this is actually a much bigger deal than I think many people realize, because it means that because with 13 millimeters of bow armor, a heavy cruiser with 203 millimeter shells can overmatch your bow, but they can't do that anymore. And I think 1 kilometer of range is kind of worth it. I mean, you can consider that, yes, it is a big deal in this ship because she has speed boost, meaning that she really likes having long range because opponents will just simply miss over and over and over again. But I think she'll still be fine with it, except now she can go fight cruisers at closer range, or heavy cruisers. But what's absurd about it, in my opinion, is that this 16.4 kilometer number is still higher than the Cleveland's. I think Cleveland is 15.6?
Yeah, it's just absurd. Like,
and she has reload booster and speed boost.
So when Bayard comes across like a battleship, and you're just like, okay, well, here's my reload booster. I'm just going with IFHE. I'm going to do 20,000 damage to you in the space of this reload booster. What are you going to do about it?
Burn down and sink. Because
Pretty
that's
much.
yeah. I mean,
Be Slava.
yeah. Unless enemy team has Poeta, it's. I had some good games. I had some pretty terrible games, and a lot of it had to do with if you try and hide behind an island and spam, and then you get detected, and of course there's carriers, so you're going to get detected, and you take that one hit, or you're trying to dodge maneuver, you've got speed boost going, you're going 40 knots in a cruiser, you're zipping around, and you take that one hit. It's like, damn it. And it is what it is. But once you learn the fire arcs and how to lead, because especially if you've been testing Russian battleships and you go to this cruiser, it's like, oh my god. But once you learn the flight time and where you need to shoot with it, and you can do some pretty stupid things with it. And yeah, I feel really bad for Cleveland in this case and other similar light cruisers, because it's like, there you go again with a bit of a power creep, if you will. But I mean, the Cleveland offers something different, radar, and I almost feel like maybe USN ships should just get the AA ability as it is, and then give it something else on top of that to just kind of always give it something.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely feels like Cleveland has fallen behind the power creep gap real bad.
The worst part is that you know how Cleveland is 25 millimeters all over? Bayard is 27 in the middle. So yeah, I mean, why not? Even just like normal stats wise, even if you took out reload booster and speed boost, I think Bayard might be comparable to Cleveland, or should be. Sure, she has 200 meters worse concealment, but she is slightly faster by like 1.5 knots or 6 knots. That's without speed boost. So you have a 20% speed boost on top of that, plus a reload booster, because their firepower is identical, I believe. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Nearest makes no difference in the firepower department without the speed or without the reload boost. You feel like you actually need to kind of like nerf the reload rate on Bayard a bit, just so that speed boost or that reload boost doesn't feel so ridiculous.
Feels more like Bayard is a tier 9 ship to me, if Cleveland is tier 8. Or maybe,
honestly, I've always felt that Cleveland as a tier 8 has always been something of a weak sauce cruiser anyway.
I know what it is. It's because when Bayard was designed, Cleveland was still tier 6. That must be it.
Yeah, we go back to the fact that when I don't feel like Cleveland got enough buffs when it went from tier 6 to tier 8. I still don't. It's a decent ship, but it is not by any stretch of the imagination above average at tier 8, in my opinion.
I agree.
Bring back the dual citadel or split citadel.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, we got one more ship to talk about, and that's Georgia. And honestly, I feel like Georgia's almost too damn good now. Like, with the 26-second reload and the speed boost and the ridiculous secondaries from Alabama, it's just, or Massachusetts, excuse me, not Alabama. It's just kind of just a ridiculous ship.
I would want to agree with you. I had that same outlook, but I've played too many games in this ship. I mean, I've played an unhealthy amount of games in this ship. I want to love this ship, but I feel it's garbage.
See, I think that the 6-gun salvos, how accurate they are, like, I can make this ship do things that makes me cackle in glee in the manner of Pobeda.
I wish I could agree with you, but time and time again, I have fired those guns until they have melted, and just the sheer misses, just the, oh, you hit, but you did like no damage. It just frustrating to no end. And I want to love this ship. And again, like putting on the speed boost and going 40 knots in a USN battleship is stupid. Is absolutely stupid. The secondaries, yeah, they're pretty good. I kind of wish they would be buffed a little bit more. Now, I haven't tried. Is it actually the same as Massachusetts? Because I didn't think it was.
I'm not sure if they're exactly the same, but they go out to like 11 kilometers and you don't need to put on manual AA and they hit a hell of a lot.
I didn't. I I I felt they could be improved, and see, this is the thing with knives now. You have torps, you have secondaries, you have other weapon systems to help boost, and you still have speed. You have amazing AA. Like, the ship is great. It's got good armor. And even if you're not hitting well with the main guns, all your other systems are kicking in to help you have an enjoyable experience. And I feel like with Georgia, the ship is great. The speed is stupid outstanding. The secondaries are kind of working, but I feel they should be a little better for its tier. And the armor, okay, it's there, it's okay. And the guns, if they did hit, would be enjoyable. But they're not. They're not hitting for me. And I don't know what else I could do to make the ship enjoyable. It doesn't have torpedoes, and obviously you don't want to sail in and try to do any of that knife fighting like you would with a Scharnhorst knives now. But if you had, say, Massachusetts buffed levels of secondaries, then even if you're not hitting well with the guns, at least you're augmenting your damage there and you feel like you're doing something. And
it's really close to that though, Vanessa. Like, they are really good secondaries. Like, I've go ahead and play with them a little bit more today, but they're really quite good.
The thing is though, I didn't show it at 11. Maybe I'll mess around with a secondary build on it, because I'm obviously not hitting with the guns anyway. And when I do, like, the shell bounces, or I do like 3,000 or 5,000 damage, and that's it. It's like, and I want to love the ship. I really do. I put an obscene amount of games testing this ship, and at the end of the day, I feel like people are going to play this ship and like, this is garbage, and they're not going to want to play it.
What's the fastest battleship in the game? Is it the Republic right now?
When it drops its speed boost, yeah, I think so.
Isn't Georgia like 5 knots faster than Republic?
I don't think so.
With speed boosts active?
I'll have to go check that.
Georgia's base speed is higher than in fact,
but doesn't it?
Georgia's base speed
get the improved speed boost though, don't they?
No. So Georgia's speed by default is 34.6 knots. Republic is 31.5, and their speed boost is 8%. And 31.5 multiplied by 1.08 is 34 knots, meaning that this battleship is faster without speed boost, and she has a 15% speed boost.
Yeah, well, I'll have to check the numbers, because she doesn't feel that fast when you're speed boosting. Like, I feel like I'm going faster in Republic, but honestly, maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention.
I really didn't. I wasn't paying attention to it, that the speed boost on her was 15%. 40 knots on a battleship? What?
Is obscene.
Isn't that faster than like a stock Shimakaze?
Yes, it is. That is obscene.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
I was memeing at the start of a match, and just sailing along a Kabaros and like keeping up with. Granted, they weren't speed boosting, but it's like, hey, look, everyone, I'm going 40 knots in a battleship. It's just stupid.
Alrighty. Well, we have to talk about the CV rework test before we get completely lose our minds with the speed boosting Georgia. But so just this morning, a huge test for the CV rework changes were announced and will take place on the Supertest server. The post reads as follows. In order to estimate the impact of aircraft carrier spotting and scouting capabilities in battles, we will hold a closed test session with the special weather settings on the map north. Overall, 4 weather scenarios will be tested. Scenario 1. Aircraft can't detect ships with AA turned off. If your AA is turned on, aircraft can detect ships as long as they're within firing range of the AA guns. 2. Aircraft can't detect ships with AA turned off during the first 10 minutes of the battle. If AA is turned on, the aircraft can detect ships as long as they are within firing range of their AA guns. Scenario 3. Aircraft can't detect ships with AA turned off at the beginning of the battle. After that, over the course of 20 minutes, the air detectability range of ships gradually increase to the current basic value. If AA is turned on, the aircraft can detect ships as long as they are within firing range of their AA guns. Scenario 4. Aircraft can't detect ships with the AA turned off at the beginning of the battle. After that, over the course of 10 minutes, air detectability range of ships gradually increases to the current basic value. If AA is turned on, aircraft can detect ships as long as they're within firing range of the AA guns. These test sessions will help us gather the required data to estimate extreme cases and determine steps forward for improvement. Please note these mechanics are built as a rough prototype and will only be used to collect stats. So, Vanessa Arun, is this the way of the future for balanced carrier gameplay, or is this the wrong thing to test? I'm particularly concerned about the impact in ranked and clan battles.
I hope not, because it doesn't say anything about minimaps or any kind of detection at all, which seems kind of weird, because if anything, I would expect there to at least be like a dot on the minimap that shows that you can see those ships, or your allies can see. Because right now, if the planes feels kind of weird, because it's really disconnected from the rest of the game. Because if they can't spot them and can't even show them on the minimap, what? You're gonna have to look at what the allied planes are doing and where they're dropping to know where the enemy ships are. Seems really weird.
I guess one thing that I noticed, Arun, just having read through this here on the show, is that in all cases, the AA, the detectability is to aircraft is the same as the range of your AA guns, and when they're firing. That's a change from the current way that it works, isn't it?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Well, so all of these scenarios say that if AA is turned on, aircraft can detect ships as long as they're within firing range of the AA guns. Currently, you can be detected beyond the range of your AA guns
of course.
in an AA by planes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, battleships are spotted from really far away.
So your AA guns in a battleship are what, right? Right now, they're 6 kilometers?
Something like that.
So your air detection goes from 10 or 11 kilometers to 6 kilometers in a battleship.
Is there like a maximum range on how far planes can see still? It used to be 11 kilometers.
I don't know, but like that's what I'm saying is I'm looking at this and there seems to be that seems to be the undercurrent here.
Yeah, that seems insane. Like I can understand that for like destroyers, but I think that was already the case for DDs. And maybe cruisers, but battleships? Yeah. Considering how strong of AA platforms some battleships are, I don't know how nice that is going to be. And I think I think even balance aside, it'll feel really jarring when you see a giant-ass battleship. You're flying, it's open water, there's nothing in the way. You're just flying, and suddenly a battleship appears, like with an invisibility cloak. I don't know. That seems kind of odd.
It does seem odd, and I don't know if there's so we're not. These aren't exactly patch notes, guys. These are just like a blog post about the general testing that they're doing. But for right now, it seems really odd.
So I'm reading this and rereading it and trying to understand. And aircraft can't detect ships with AA turned off. What's to stop the entire team from just everyone turning their AA off and then the carrier can't see anyone? Am I understanding this right?
Actually, I think that's the point.
I hope you guys know where the P key is. I think that's going to be the name of this episode. Do you know where the P key is?
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, I would make a recommendation. Change the keybind of that to something else. I have bound it to the G button, so I can easily double tap it or tap it whenever I need to without having to move my hand. Yeah, but I think the idea is that the CV doesn't go and spot the ships. Allied ships will have to go spot them instead, and then the CV can go and strike.
However, if the opposing team is crafty and everyone just straight up memes and everyone turns their AA off, what is the carrier going to do for however many minutes until they'll just kind of fly and enjoy the view, I guess?
I don't think that's even the crazy part. The crazy part is that the battleships will turn their anti-air off, and all the other ships, and then the CV is flying along, and then suddenly battleships and cruisers appear right below the planes. You know what that reminds me of? EVE Online.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But
I was going to say a Romulan warbird decloaking and nuking you.
You're also not wrong. I don't know. I think that on the positive side here, what I think the good thing is that they are obviously aware that there are aspects of the CV rework that are unpleasant to people playing the game. Now, I don't think that they're, from what I understand, they are absolutely not going to pull the CV rework out or do anything dramatic with it, but they are continuing to work on it. And I think this proves that they are, and they're willing to do some pretty crazy things within the framework that they already have defined to try and get it to work. And I think that's at least a positive sign.
I think so too, but I would still, I still think that the idea that to make CV spotting work as though it's in Cyclone makes more sense. That way the planes can spot ships for allies, but it's only when allied ships are close to those ships. Otherwise, it's just minimap. And otherwise, it'll at least give people intelligence. Like, they'll know where the enemies are. They just can't fire on them. And I think that seems like a much more reasonable first step to try, whether this would work or not.
Completely agree. I think that's fair.
Alrighty, well, we'll see what the results of this test are, and maybe they'll give us a blog post on kind of how it turned out. So we have 2 questions of the week from the forums, and both are from the user Hold My Beer, which I think is fantastic. I'm assuming that he plays only German battleships with secondary builds and drives into the center of the map. But that said, he says, with the testing and possible addition of iceberg mechanics to the game, what are the chances that we could see something like Project Habakkuk ever enter into the game?
Maybe in a scenario, which would probably be a pretty interesting scenario to say the least, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with you there, Vanessa. I don't think that you could balance it in terms of the PvP aspects, but something like where you're escorting it or you're trying to attack it, I think that might be a really cool scenario PvE thing. And have like pieces of it fall off as you attack it, the more damage it takes. That would be really, really pretty cool.
Yeah, would definitely heat things up.
I don't know.
Trying to put that thing on ice.
I would say it's not too out of line. I mean, if we consider what Soviet ships are like, so, Soviet destroyers are actually cruisers, Soviet cruisers are actually battleships, Soviet battleships are actually kind of carriers.
Death Stars.
Yeah. And then obviously Soviet carriers are then, airfields, right, on islands. So, Habakkuk wouldn't be too out of place in that case. But joking aside, I also think as a scenario, sure, would be interesting enough. I just think that maybe, I'm not sure how worth it is for Wargaming to spend resources on something like that, considering how few people play these types of games. I think maybe they could add this into like a PvP scenario, like arms races, except it's like a rare type of deal where you very rarely get it, like Ocean maybe, where one side has to do like an escort mission or something like that. If it's rare enough, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be the most balanced, but I guess you would still want it to be balanced. So kind of unsure how Wargaming could go about it. It would be cool to have it in the game. I'm just not sure how worth it is for them to add it.
Alrighty, well, the second question from Hold My Beer is, what are your thoughts on introducing legendary modules upgrades, we know Aaron, into the game for lower tier ships? Personally, I usually just sell off my lower tier ships as I progress through the lines to the tier 10 ship. It could make some of those ships that don't really see much action a lot more fun to play.
I think it's too difficult to get legendary upgrades for this to really be a thing, because you'll only have handfuls of players that will have these legendary upgrades on lower tier ships. Actually, I'm not even sure if you would have any anytime soon, because how many people play lower tiers right now so much that they would be able to farm something like a legendary upgrade? I don't know.
But turn that on its head, Arun. If there is a legendary, if there is something to play for at a lower level, you might see an increase in people playing mid-tier and lower tier battles.
Sure, which is probably really terrible for the people who are actually at that lower tier, because, hey, now, not only do we have to put up with a Belfast, now it's a Belfast with a legendary upgrade. Awesome. I understand what you're saying, though. I just think that it being tied to a specific ship kind of sucks because it's not transferable, so you're stuck just playing that one specific ship. I think some other idea that, covers some more ships at a time, like maybe a legendary upgrade that applies to all of the Royal Navy ships at a specific tier, for example, or something like that. It doesn't even have to give the same buff to all of the ships. It could be a separate buff for all of the ships, except, all of the ships in that tier for that specific nation add into the XP pool or quest pool or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, I rarely use the legendary modules that I have. I think oftentimes it's too much of a trade-off to the play style that I want to play. And I kind of feel like it would be the same at the lower tiers. And, that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of meant for something that, here is your reward for getting to the max tier, and here's your continued reward for playing max tier. I think, the gameplay is different at the lower tiers, and I think that in itself is something that offers a reprieve for when you get to max level and you get sick of it.
I don't know. I think that I really do feel like there's something that needs to be done about the kind of like the mid-tier gameplay of the game, because tier 5, tier 6, tier 7, tier 8 even used to be some of the most fun that I had in World of Warships, and it just isn't true anymore. Like I spent the other day playing kind of mid-tier battles with a guy, and it was a real struggle fest, and I didn't really have a whole lot of fun. So I don't know. I think that maybe legendary upgrades are not the answer. Maybe legendary upgrades where you have to do tons and tons of battles on a single ship are not the answer. Yet I feel like something to incentivize people playing mid-tier ships really needs to be done, because so many of the events that you see, you do them at the highest level that you possibly can because it's easier. It's easier to get a higher damage. It's easier to get citadels. It's easier to do stuff like that at these, in a high tier ship than it is in a lower tier ship.
I think something that absolutely needs to change with wargaming is, when we have these events where you gain points and stuff, like, I think, right, is the event going on still right now? But the one that has been going on for a while.
Honor versus whatever.
Don't you gain more points when you're playing a higher tier ship?
Yes.
That's bullshit. It shouldn't be that way, in my opinion. Okay, sure, maybe you can add a difference. You gain more points at higher tiers, but make it like brackets. Let's say 7 to 10 get the same amount of points, 4 to 6 get the same amount of points, and 1 to 3 get the same amount of points, or if they even get any points. That way, if you play 7, 8, 9, or 10, you would get the same amount of points. You don't feel punished for playing those tiers. But I think the main thing that we need for mid-tiers is a much less aggressive matchmaker, especially that tries to match into higher tiers. It's okay if you're tier 5, play versus tier 6. It's okay if you're tier 6, play versus tier 7. But tier 5 versus tier 7 is not good. Tier 7 versus tier 9 depends on what you're playing. Often it's not good, but sometimes it's okay, depending on the ship. But tier 8 and tier 10 is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Tirpitz was, maybe still is, one of my most played ships. But I haven't played her in a long time, because every time I play her, I'm in a tier 10 game. Why would I want to play Tirpitz in a tier 10 game? Hell, I can't even overmatch, maybe not half, but a great portion of the cruisers there because of my gun caliber. And as a result of that, I don't want to play Tirpitz there. Baltimore, for example, in my opinion, is an insanely powerful ship for tier 8.
It absolutely is.
If you're in a tier 8 game, if you're in a tier 10 game, you're like, well, okay, sure. It's an okay ship, but there's nothing special about it, because at tier 10, a few battleships have 380 guns. And the idea here is that Baltimore has 27 millimeters of armor everywhere, so 380 millimeter caliber guns just bounce off. Meaning that if you're in a tier 8 game where almost all the ships have 380 or lower caliber guns, not all of them, but many, you are fairly safe against many of those battleships, German battleships, for example. But if you're in a tier 10 game, that goes away. Now you have to play in a different way. You can't be aggressive versus battleships. And that's not fun. If I want to play Baltimore, it's because I want to take advantage of that. Sure, maybe that's okay because Baltimore is very strong. But if I were to play a weak tier 8 ship, then it's even worse because now I'm playing versus tier 10 as a ship that doesn't really even match up to other tier 8s. It's not fun, and I think matchmaking just shouldn't be as aggressive in matching up lower tiers with higher tiers. +-1 I'm okay with, but +-2 I think like there's the 3-minute rule where matchmaking changes some of the rules where it loosens them. I don't know, man. Maybe make +-2 appear at like 2 minutes or 3 minutes or something like that. So you have higher chance of getting into games where you don't get up tiered this hard.
Yeah, definitely don't disagree. I'm a patient person, so I don't have to get in game immediately as soon as I hit the battle button. But I understand why Wargaming does what it does, because for most people, their attention spans can be limited, and they want to get in game, want to get in battle, and you obviously have to appease that. And I completely agree, Haroon, but I can see why Wargaming does what it does.
Alrighty. Well, did you guys have any announcements or anything else to add before the end of the episode this week? Yet another episode, Haroon, that we stayed under an hour. Oh, wait.
I think today it's appropriate, considering last week.
Yeah, we had a lot of catching up to do.
Alrighty. Well, that's it for this week, folks. We have a new spot on the NA forums just for the Warships Podcast. Be sure to check that out for news and where to ask questions of the week. Check for that link in the description. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. On Twitter today, you can go ahead and take a look at some screenshots that I posted from the PTS server. Last week, I did take, or not last week, last episode, I took a fair amount of crap from people on Reddit that said, hey, you're talking about Colbert as a cruiser. It's actually a destroyer called Kleber. And yeah, check out. There's some screenshots of the actual Colbert, which will be a tier 10 cruiser with some really interesting gun layout. We currently have some previews of from the PTS, but we can't play quite yet. I also have some pictures up on there of the Smolensk and the Summers, which is a very cool looking destroyer leader with a lot of guns on it. So don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. We, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a Patreon backer yourself. Backers are what make the podcast possible, and we absolutely could not do it without you guys, so thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.